Good evening and welcome to the Green and White podcast brought to you by Argyle Life, or should that be the Red, White and Blue podcast for the Euros. We're going to be talking about England against Serbia, obviously the game that England played yesterday. Not the most exciting game ever, I think was the consensus. Certainly that's what I saw. Got the job done, 1-0 win. But a lot of criticism of Southgate that I've seen, a lot of criticism of some of the players. We're going to be talking about maybe Phil Foden not delivering in an England shirt like he maybe does for Manchester City. Also talking about maybe on the positive side, Jude Bellingham played very well. So a few positives to be taken. And currently I'm seeing that Belgium are 1-0 down against Slovakia. So maybe actually getting the job done, getting the 3 points, that's what's important. Joining me to talk through England against Serbia are Finlay Allen. Hello, Finlay.
Hello, all right?
I'm good, thank you. You?
Yeah, not bad, thanks.
And also joining me, Adam Price. Hello, Adam.
Hello. Yeah, I'm happy to take up half your screen for the purposes of this. I hope our viewers enjoy. If not, well, we don't have a complaint to address, so sorry.
As you can see, I'm not Aaron. I'm Stan George. I've written a bit for Argyle Life, sometimes host the spaces, so that's me. Make sure you keep your comments coming in. We're live on Twitter, or X as we have to call it now. Live on YouTube. YouTube might be the best one because we can fit some long comments in on YouTube. And I can see that there's quite a few choice comments, actually, a bit of choice language in the comments already, so that's interesting. Let's get us started off. So just go through some of the stats that we saw from yesterday. So obviously 1-0 win, just 0.52 XG created by England, 11 combined shots, which according to Opta Joe is the lowest of any game at the Euros since they started counting, which was in 1980. So that probably shows that it maybe wasn't the most exciting game last night, and we've had a lot of high-scoring games at the Euros. Is it that we can just trust Southgate maybe to deliver efficient but not the most exciting football? Finn, what did you think? What did you think of the way England played last night?
Yeah, I mean, for someone who's actually usually going to put out there pretty anti-Southgate, I felt that generally the performance in the first half, I thought first 20, obviously when we scored, excellent. We had full control of the game, and then we kind of sat off them for the rest of the first half. And although you could say, oh yeah, we gave up possession maybe a bit too easily and kind of sat off them, I felt we had control of the game in that first half. They didn't really have many chances. I think the only chance they had in that first half was thanks, Paul. The only chance we had in that first half was when Trent lost the ball and then Mitrovic had that kind of snapshot, but that was from our own sort of doing. So in terms of any chances that Serbia created in that first half, there wasn't much. And then, you had that sort of, I believe it was just sort of 5-10 minutes before half time. If Harry Kane or Phil Foden were in the right place, I actually thought Walker should have shot himself, really. I thought that probably be the better option. He had a good angle. So, yeah, I thought the first half was good. Second half, not great. However, I'm sure we can come onto it in a minute. We kind of already know what Southgate is like as a manager. I feel like he's kind of more conservative.
Safegate, according to Gaza Brownhigh.
Safegate. That's a good name. It's sort of conservatism over anything else, really. Yeah. But I feel like that's kind of the natural sort of way in international football. It's kind of like if you look at like France, right, when they won the World Cup, like they didn't play that well. They scraped past Australia in the first game, beat Peru in the second.
Sorry to just cut off Finn, but I might be showing my age a bit here, certainly compared to you. But I remember the Greek team of 2004, who were maybe one of the most boring football teams ever assembled, and they won the tournament. If you was an older vintage, also remember Denmark 1992. Certainly, if I ever hear my dad talk about it, it was mostly passes among the back four, and I think that they changed the back pass rule after that tournament. Because
I think the semi-final, they literally spent like 10, 15 minutes back passing it to Peter Schmeichel, right?
Yeah, I think so. So you might be right, actually. International football may be a boring manager.
I do feel like it hasn't. It has the feel of something that hasn't got Pep Guardiola's handprints all over it, and it's kind of like it's a bit more conservative, like football was sort of 10, 15 years ago, where it's sort of like it just doesn't feel as attacking. And I know our sort of I guess instinct is to go, well, we've got all these amazing attacking players, but I think it's literally you together for like 2 months. We're not here to be the best team. I feel like we're here to win the tournament. Do you know what I mean? So Spain can look better on the eye if they want, but ultimately it doesn't matter. Like Portugal didn't win a game. I had a bit more of a different view, in the last Euros, but I've kind of realised, I think, that usually the teams that win the tournament, and I'm not saying England are going, we can come on to that in a bit, but I'm not saying England are necessarily going to, but the teams that win the tournament are the ones, obvious, this sounds a bit obvious, but the ones that can just get the win no matter what, and we did that last night. I feel like there's a lot of times where England would have played like that, and we must remember that it's been a very long season as well, but England would have played like that in previous years and not got the win, and ultimately it's 3 points on the board in the top of the group with one game. So you look at it that way, it's the perfect start, I suppose. No goals conceded. And the only chances they had in that game, regardless of us not being particularly good in the second half, were snapshots. And I feel like Serbia you would expect us to beat them, but they're a tricky side, right? They're not.
They've got good players. I think obviously Mitrovic did very well in the Premier League. Milinkovic-Savic is highly regarded. Obviously, maybe not so much since he's gone to Saudi Arabia. But no, I do agree with you that Serbia have got some good players. They're a physical team, very tall. I think I saw that only one of their players was under 6 foot, and he was 5'7". So that always reminds me maybe of those sort of England cricket teams when they put Ben Duckett in between Stuart Broad and Zach Crawley, him in that team. Maybe a bit of an outlier. I'm just going to move on. Adam, what do you make of that? So sort of like boring, but maybe that's not a bad thing?
Yeah. Was it boring? Absolutely. Was it the most boring game of the Euros so far? I mean, even including today's game, 100%. It was not a good game for a neutral to watch. If you wanted fun, you didn't want to be in Gelsenkirchen yesterday for all sorts of reasons. I think, having said all of that, is it fine? I mean, yeah, it is. There's no issue with us going and getting a win without particularly looking terrific, particularly in the first game of a tournament. I think there are other years. I mean, let's take 2016 as an example, the last Euros before Southgate, where we played Russia on the opening day and actually looked pretty good for a lot of that. I remember Igor Akinfeev, I mean, who remembers, making a number of quality saves before we got the breakthrough, and then we still didn't win the game. And that tournament, I remind anyone, did not work out too well for us. I think it's a lot nicer to be in a situation where we're looking at a game where we've not played particularly well, but we've still won it, and we've still generally comfortably won it. I mean, we got the goal early. We had the next best chance of the game, which I think, I mean, Kane will be disappointed not to score. I think it was a good save. And
very good save, yeah.
It was, yeah. It's more of a good save than a bad miss, I think we'd certainly say.
I agree, yeah.
And from there, I mean, they've had a few. I mean, they had one shot from inside the penalty area all game, and that came from the chance we were discussing earlier for Mitrovic. And they had no clear-cut chances. We had a couple. We won the game. I mean, I'm not saying that I loved watching it. But if that was the Euros final and we played like that and we'd won the game without looking great, I'd love it. It's getting the result is what matters. And I think we kind of lose sight of that. The amount of times we've gone into the tournaments and not got the result. I mean, it's only the second time we've ever won our first game at the Euros. It's 4 tournaments in a row where we've won our opener, all under Southgate. And before that, I think you have to go back to 2006, I want to say, Paraguay, when we last won our opening game before Southgate arrived. So, was it boring? Absolutely. I don't think any of us are going to shy away from that. But was it fine? Yes. And I think for the opening game of a tournament, being fine and getting the result is nothing to worry about.
Do you not think that obviously we saw, didn't we, opening day, Germany put 5 past Scotland, much to many of our amusements, I think. Spain, obviously, against the Croatia side, who are probably better on paper than Serbia, they scored 3. And this is sort of open to either of you, really, whoever wants to jump in. Do you think it's a concern that we look so sort of disjointed against Serbia?
No, I don't. Sorry, Phil. I was just going to say, last year as we made the final, we scored 2 goals in the group stage, didn't concede any. There are a lot of teams. I remember the Dutch played particularly exciting football in the group stage last time. Really interested a lot of people and lost to the Czechs the next round. There are teams that will look very good that will fall off, and there are teams that will look okay that will grow into it. That's not to say that we'll definitely be that team, but there will be teams like that who start slowly and start going later on in the tournament. So, hey, yeah, I'd have liked to have put 5 goals past Serbia yesterday. I'd have liked to have played some champagne football, but equally, considering we've got the result, right now, I don't particularly care that we didn't. It's not something that is let's call it a concern, certainly yet.
Do you agree with that, Finn?
I think we're so used to, being like, when we're talking about Argyle, for example, about needing to play good football because you play 46 games a season. Do you know what I mean? So you have to kind of sustain that over like a period of time. But like I said, it's knockout football basically, and you kind of have to just, it's all about winning the games. I kind of concur with what Adam said. I'd have liked to score 5 goals, but I was a bit more concerned after the Iceland game last week because England had lots of chances and couldn't break them down. That's what worried me more. And yes, England didn't create loads of chances, but the ones that they did were of good quality. Like you said, Stan, it was a brilliant save by the Serbian goalkeeper. Had that been another day, that would have been 2-0 to England. And I think the way that people often look at football, I'm not saying that this would have necessarily been the case, but people have gone, 2-0, that's a lot more convincing, So, and then you also had like the Walker one in like I mentioned. So I think in general, I'm not too concerned, and I sort of agree. It's all about the result, especially in the first game. It was a cliche, but the pundits were saying it last night. You don't want to be your best in the first game. Like, who cares about being your best in the first game? You just care about getting that first game out the way, and then you can look to improve. And like I said, maybe if we were playing, I don't know, no offense to them, but if we were playing Slovenia in the first game and we played like that, I would be a bit more concerned. But Serbia are a decent side.
Well, we'll sort of get on to Slovenia in a minute when we sort of talk about our next opponents, obviously Denmark. But no, I was maybe being a little bit facetious with my comment about them only creating 0.52 XG because Serbia did only create 0.18. So England still, on that metric, did have the lion's share of the chances, even if it was a game with few chances. Just sort of moving on to talk about a player I think has been quite divided opinions about his performances in an England shirt. And that's Phil Foden, obviously playing off the left last night. Not the same position that he plays in for Manchester City, where he plays sort of more as a number 10, or certainly has done this season. He didn't really have his best game last night. I think gave the ball away quite a lot. I think there was one particularly frustrating moment in the second half where we were on a bit of a counter-attack and he just passed it square straight to a Serbian player. Just 4 goals in 35 England caps for Phil Foden. 1 goal in a tournament. I think he's played 8 games in major tournaments and only scored once. 24 times he started for England, has been subbed off in over half of those games. Compare that to his Manchester City record. Do you think maybe the style of play isn't getting the best out of Phil Foden? Or do you think Phil Foden maybe has to try and make an impact off the bench rather than from the start for England going forward?
I mean, it's a bit of both. It's a bit of both of, he's got to do more because that record is not good enough. Full stop. I know he's a player who's divided his opinion a lot of the time. I think we're all kind of universal yesterday that he had a very disappointing game. So is it necessarily one where we need to do more to get the best out of him? I think the onus right now is probably more on the player because we know what he can do, and we know that we're not going to be in a situation where we're going to be playing him in his best position because we've got Jude Bellingham there, and it's going to be very difficult to dislodge him. Touch wood, other than a tournament-ending injury like Neymar or something like that. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But I think realistically, he's got to do a bit more. I mean, this can happen. We've seen it a number of times where players don't quite bring their club form to the international game, and it could be system based. I mean, I'd use Trent Alexander-Arnold as an example, and I know we're going to come on to him a little bit later on, but generally speaking, at Liverpool, I don't think there's anybody who in Liverpool system or any Liverpool fan who would swap their right back at the minute. I think. And it might be Scouse bias, who knows? But I think the system where he is and the way he plays in that system perfectly fits what they want to do. In England, it's not quite, or rather for England, it's not quite like that. And I think Foden is in a very similar situation where working with Pep Guardiola, being in that Manchester City team, there's a lot of his needs that are catered to in a similar way that it is for Trent Alexander-Arnold at Liverpool. But in the same way that for England, you'd rather have Kyle Walker playing at right back based on the system, I think in this system, it's very difficult to find the perfect place for Phil Foden. And I certainly wouldn't in any way want to sacrifice Bellingham as a result of that. So the onus ultimately is on him. He's got to prove his worth to this England side, which he struggled to do across the majority of his caps. And by all means, I'd give him a chance to do it. And certainly from the left, I think he can do it. It's not his primary position, but I think he can be successful there. And I'd love to see him prove it because obviously he's got the sort of talent that very, very few players have. But it's got to be on him more than anything, I think.
It's kind of, I mean, he has played off the left for Manchester City, maybe not so much.
Yeah, it's not totally alien.
But he was very successful there in previous seasons.
Yeah. So I mean, at some point you've got to wonder why it's not worked out for him at international level, because all the talent is there. And I just think he's now got to take the game by the scruff of the neck. And I'd give him every chance. I think having got that win, we're in a nice position now to go into the Denmark game and give him another chance on the left-hand side. And I'd love to see him deliver because it would be a huge plus for the team. But yeah, right now, I think the onus is on him a little more than it is England to get the best out of him. He's got to step up.
No, fair enough. Finn, your thoughts on Phil Foden? Anything to sort of add to what Adam's just said?
No, I generally agree because we know how good Phil Foden is. But like yesterday, he wasn't even completing 5-yard passes. So that isn't to do with anything to do with the system. That's just a player having a poor game. And to be honest, we've got so many good players in this England team now that, like, I'm a big believer of actually, Phil Foden is a great player, but if he doesn't work in the system, I mean, I think we should drop him really, because it's like what I could see yesterday, because he likes to roam. Both him and Bellingham just like to roam because they're players of that quality that can just pick up spaces anywhere and cause trouble. But because we've got two wingers who like to, and to be fair to Saka, he did a very good job yesterday, I thought, of going on the outside. I mean, that's how we scored the goal. But generally, him and Foden are two players that like to play on the inside, which often mean that Harry Kane has to stay a lot further upfield and not occupy the spaces that he usually does, and we know how effective he is when doing that. I know some people say, he shouldn't be dropping so deep, but that's a lot of what his game is built on. Even at Bayern Munich now, he's got Sane and Musiala, who kind of just, he drops quite deep and sort of does that thing. But when we've got two players that often like to come on the inside, he has to stay further forward. And if Foden isn't delivering as he should with his talents, and then is therefore kind of possibly, in my opinion, sort of lesser. How would you say it? Sort of the influence of Harry Kane is lessened because of that. For example, I think, we shouldn't be afraid of giving someone. Sorry, who would I bring in?
Who would you bring in for Foden if you were to drop him?
See, that's a difficult one because
obviously Bowen came on last night and pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I really wouldn't be opposed to that because I think actually looking at players that could possibly play wide, you're looking at maybe Gordon, who I think is quite similar to Phil Foden, maybe a bit more of a hybrid of a sort of Grealish and Foden type, but still quite kind of a similar player. And I think Foden is a better player than Anthony Gordon in general. Cole Palmer could possibly play wide, could he? But I don't think that's his best position, and I don't think he plays there lots. So I think, yes, probably Bowen would be the guy that I would like to, and it might be a bit hypocritical, but the guy that I would like to see, because I just think he's the most sort of raw player we have in terms of from bits I've seen of the Premier League and even the warm game the other week is Eze, and see what he could do out there. Because having watched him, I know it was against Argyle, but having watched him this season, he when he came on, he was literally, he was sort of he sort of just drifts and again does what Foden we know Foden can do, which is drift, pick up the ball in space and make stuff happen. But if it's not happening for England, why, either Bowen or Eze would be my picks. And to be fair,
don't knock what he did against Argyle.
That was insane, yeah.
Also, if you do it against Argyle, I'm sure you can do it against Denmark or Slovenia or Germany later on.
But I mean, the kind of, I wasn't that keen on Bowen coming on last night. I thought, why is he bringing Bowen on at the time that he did? But he really did surprise me. He was England's best player probably, and sort of from the substitute bench at least he made a kind of sort of noticeable impact.
I think we'll just sort of talk about the substitutes. I think a little bit as well because I thought Conor Gallagher actually made quite a good impact from the sub bench as well. And sort of, I guess going back is that there was kind of a bit of a discussion about who should start in midfield. I think Declan Rice was one of the first names on the team sheet. I don't think there's a person in the country who would have not started Declan Rice given the season that he's had for Arsenal. But obviously Southgate decided to go for Alexander-Arnold, who's obviously mostly a right back. I think I've actually seen some mixed opinions, certainly reading the papers this morning. On the ball, quite impressive. Didn't give the ball away a lot. Showed his sort of technical ability. I mean, I think we've always known that Trent Alexander-Arnold is a very good passer of the ball. You can sort of see the pitch really well, pick out a pass. But maybe some of the defensive side of his game, not really there. He didn't win a tackle last night. He only won 2 out of his 5 ground duels, only made 2 interceptions. I think, certainly from my perspective, I thought when Gallagher came on, there was a bit more bite in midfield, and I think that helped us play. I think there was certainly maybe a sense with Alexander-Arnold that the team were just dropping too deep, and he couldn't really get his foot in, get a hold of the ball, and I think Gallagher really helped that. Do you think the Trent Alexander-Arnold in midfield thing worked? Or would you maybe like to see Gallagher from the start next time, or even someone like Adam Wharton?
I mean, from my end, I kind of agree with almost everything you said there. In truth, I think Gallagher's performance really epitomised the team as a whole, I thought, because he's come on as a sub. Is a game that needs to be broken down a little. He's won 3 fouls in a limited time. He was on the pitch. It pretty much was it pretty? No, but was it effective? Absolutely, and it's what we needed at the time. And I really want to much like Foden, I really want to see it work with Trent. He's one of the best technical players we've got, without a doubt, and on the ball. There was certainly a period where in the game, possibly between 30 and 60 minutes, where he's the only one that really looked threatening going forward for England, taking shots. I think there was a period where I think there were about 6 shots during the game, and 3 of them were from Trent Alexander-Arnold from exactly the same area. So you clearly know what he's trying to do. And one of those flying into the top corner would, it would please me a lot. There is an issue ultimately with his defenders. And I know I've mentioned it before that.
And do you think you'd sort of see that any position he's in? So maybe even as a right back, wouldn't be the best defensively. Certainly, probably not compared to Kyle Walker.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think as much as Liverpool wouldn't swap him, I would agree with them not swapping him because he fits their system like a glove. I think, I certainly wouldn't have him for Walker at this point. I think he's not good enough, Trent Alexander-Arnold, in the tackle. I got that out eventually, didn't I? He's not a good enough tackler to be an effective defender. I think he's better in the air than a lot of people would give him credit for, and he could potentially win a few of those physical battles if the game were to become like that. But yeah, it's a real conundrum how you'd use him, and I don't necessarily have the answer. I think if we're in a situation where a game's level and we want to break a team down, there's very few I'd rather have in the team than Alexander-Arnold, because he's got that ability to pick somebody out in the middle, and it's probably a dream for Harry Kane to see him on the ball and know that cross is almost certainly going to find him. But in a situation where, much like yesterday, we're ahead in the game and we're starting to feel a bit of pressure, he's probably one of the last I'd rather have around, because that's just not in his skill set to be good enough defensively. So it's horses for courses, maybe. I don't necessarily think if we're lining up against one of the favourites at any stage in this tournament that I'd be absolutely keen to have him in. But maybe if we were 1-0 down to one of those favourites, I'd absolutely get him on the field. And if we're looking to beat a team with a low block, like no doubt Slovenia will be, and perhaps Denmark as well, because they're a point would, as much as they're a better side, a point would be a decent result for them after failing to win on the opener. For these games, I think I'd very much like to have him in, and maybe we can do something similar to what we did yesterday, where we give him an hour, see how the land lies, and bring Gallagher back on if necessary. I'd keep him in for now. I wouldn't necessarily always have him, but I think he's got certain talents that nobody else in this side has, and we do well not to overlook that.
Thank you, Adam. Obviously, keep your comments coming in. Christ, that's hard to say. Whether you think it should be Trent Alexander-Arnold, Conor Gallagher, or someone else. Finn, what are your thoughts on Alexander-Arnold? I pretty much agree with everything that you've said, Adam. I think we seem pretty closely aligned on this. But Finn, go on.
Yeah, I mean, in general, I think Trent is a world-class footballer, but I don't think he's a world-class right back, nor do I think he's a world-class centre midfielder. I think.
Do you think Liverpool fans might say that he is a world-class right back?
Yeah, well, but I mean,
They might be biased.
I don't know. I think like because world-class right back, I feel like you need your right back to be able to defend well, and I feel like Trent is quite often protected by, not that he isn't, like Adam says, he's the perfect right back for Liverpool's system. I think if you gave me another team that needed a right back in the world, and you looked at their attributes, I think sort of probably 8 times out of 10 they're looking at picking Kyle Walker over Trent Alexander-Arnold in that position, just because I still think, even in the age of like wing backs and attacking fullbacks nowadays, you still need, your right back and your left back are still major parts of your defence. And if one, thinking about all of the crosses that Serbia put into the box last night, I would have felt a lot more, but I did feel a lot more confident about Walker being able to defend that at the back post than if it was Trent Alexander-Arnold, for example. But having said that, like I said, his ability on the ball is something that you can't shy away from. And I think I would still start him next game, because I think, he's just, he can. I mean, some of the crosses he put in last night, like the deliveries, there's one that hit Rice on the shoulder, which if Rice was more alert to it, probably a goal, because it's like right on his head if he directs his head to it rather than kind of looks away from it and hits his shoulder. So he's got that moment, especially when you need a moment or a spark of creativity, he can provide it. If you had Conor Gallagher on the pitch, I'm not sure he's going to do that, but against a sort of more creative, a side that are more creative than Serbia, and a side that we're going to have to be a bit more disciplined against, I'd probably go for somebody like Gallagher. Not that he's the most pleasing on the eye, but I think he would provide that balance slightly better than Alexander-Arnold would. I still think against somebody like Denmark, I'm not sure they're the best that they have been in the past few, compared to the past few years recently. So I think we'd still be the team in the ascendancy probably in that game. So I'd start Alexander-Arnold, but going on to some of the more tougher tests, I think he, in my opinion, be someone to bring off the bench more rather than like play in midfield, because it's not his natural position anyway.
Yeah, I think interesting that you mentioned Gallagher's not the easiest on the eye. I think with his sort of Love Island haircut, he probably thinks he's very easy on the eye.
That's a fair point.
But in terms of style of play, maybe not as aesthetically pleasing as Alexander-Arnold is. We've talked a lot, and it's been maybe a little bit negative. But we sort of all mentioned that the 3 points is what's most important, and we probably did enough to deserve the 3 points. Maybe talk about some players who impressed. Certainly from my perspective, Saka, first half, certainly had that fullback on toast, really. I was quite impressed with Mark Guehi. I thought he came in, did really well. Rice, very solid. And obviously Jude Bellingham, I think, won man of the match. Got the goal. Really good movement into the box. He's been doing that for Real Madrid all season. Finn, who impressed you?
Yeah, Guehi was fantastic, I thought, because especially
considering he probably wasn't going to start if Maguire had fit.
Absolutely, yeah. And that was kind of, it's one game and whatever, but it's sort of the whole kind of rhetoric in the lead up to the tournament isn't, it wasn't anything to do. We know about all the quality we've got in attacking areas. It's like, what about the defense? I think Gay probably performed a lot better than a lot of people thought he would have last night, including myself. And I think he sort of probably, unless he gets, touch wood, he doesn't, but unless he gets an injury or drops a clanger in a game, as they say, he's probably, on that performance, sort of confirmed his starting place for the rest of the tournament, I would say.
Would you agree with that, Adam?
I would, yeah. And I think I give a shout out to both centre backs, actually. I think Gay obviously has had an excellent game. I think the best thing you can say is that he's come into a team looking to win an international tournament, made his tournament debut, and he absolutely did not look out of place, which in your first game with the clean sheet behind it is really all you can ask for as well. I thought fitted in excellently and certainly eased, I think, a lot of worries, as Finn has said, about the rhetoric surrounding the team going into the tournament, knowing that defense might be a worry. He's come in and, yeah, as I say, absolutely did not look out of place. So really good stuff. And I think John Stones as well has had another excellent game. I think there was a worry with Stones, obviously, with his fitness and the fact that he's not played nearly as much this season as he'd have liked to have done. But he's come in against a really tricky strike force to face, won everything in the air, and again, much like Gaze, is part of that clean sheet. So yeah, I think certainly based on that, I'm a lot more confident with our centre backs than I would have been, say, this time last week. I certainly would not have any complaints with Gay and Stones keeping their places right throughout. I mean, in an ideal world, maybe we'll get to a stage where we've got 6 points from 2 games. We already know we've won the group and we can do a bit of rotation and testing. But that's a very ideal world. I think in the main, for anything competitive, I've got no issue with them staying in. And just a shout out to both centre backs yesterday, who I thought were both very good. Outside of the ones that were already mentioned, I know Bellingham has already been said a lot of times, but it's always worth bringing him in again. I possibly it was very nice to see Jordan Pickford remain on his toes and make the save when necessary. How often it's a very old cliche of how a goalkeeper, it's always a good time for a goalkeeper when they've got nothing to do and then come up with the goods when they need to. Hey, obviously those are shots you'd expect him to save, but I was very glad he did. And just generally speaking, it's there's a lot you can say about how England played yesterday, for good and bad. One thing you can't say is it was a poor defensive display. And given everything that was said going into the tournament, I think that's a really nice place to be in.
Yeah, I think I do agree with you on Pickford, and I think he's someone who maybe doesn't get the credit that he deserves because, I mean, for England, certainly he's performed very well at every tournament since the World Cup of 2018. So, yeah, certainly I think even though maybe his club form can be a little bit patchy, although I think he has improved on that front.
Yeah, I think he's had a very good season this season.
I think he has as well. No, I agree with that. But I also think that for England, he's been very good over a very long period of time and maybe doesn't get the credit that he deserves for that. I will just talk about Jude Bellingham maybe a little bit more because I know this might just be me listening to Richard Keys too much, but some people may be criticising him over doesn't run games, sort of important games maybe goes missing a little bit. I mean, I've always thought that these criticisms are quite unfair, to be honest, but I think he really shut them up, didn't he, last night?
Yeah, and I think, well, one, obviously, I have no doubt we'll be hearing from Keezy again, but it's part of the course at this point. But
I think as soon as he gets an agenda, that doesn't
you're done for. He's obviously delivered again. I'm sure we're going to need him a lot more in the coming weeks. But I think the Champions League finals are a fair example. That wasn't the best game he's ever played. It was one of the biggest stages, and yet he still assisted a goal. I think that's an incredible sign. So yeah, there are some people that we've mentioned who will have their agenda and will never shut up about it. But I think we're all very happy with how he's performing right now.
Yeah, and not to sort of do a Luke Littler and mention his name mention his age all the time, but he is still only 20 years old. So exciting that maybe he'll be leading England's midfield for quite a few tournaments to come. Should we have a look at the Denmark game? Look forward after our little look back to the Serbia game. So Denmark, in their first game, drew 1-1 with Slovenia. Not the best performance from them. They did probably have the lion's share of the game and the chances, but certainly against a team I think that most of us were expecting them to beat, they didn't perform as well as they can do. And I think that's been a bit of a recurring theme with Denmark over the last maybe couple of years, ever since their really strong Euros campaign, obviously in the delayed Euros of 2021, where they got to the semi-finals, lost to England at Wembley. Some criticism has been sort of levelled at their manager. Obviously a very good start, but maybe there's a feeling in there that things have maybe gone a little bit stale and they're not performing to the quality of their players. In terms of their tactics against Slovenia, it was a sort of unusual system, sort of 3-4-1-2 with back three, and then Christian Eriksen, kind of the playmaker, I guess, if you will, behind two big strikers, which is quite an unusual sort of proposition, I think, with a lot of defenders either used to a big striker and little striker, or most of the time these days just one striker. So Jonas Vint and Rasmus Højlund, both very big, very physical strikers, and Vind in particular did look very comfortable playing with his back to goal, did a lovely little layoff for Eriksen's goal. So that's kind of like the way Denmark play, a bit of a different proposition to Serbia with the two strikers. And I think most of us would agree that Denmark, probably the second best team in the group on paper. They were the second seeds. What are your thoughts on Denmark, Finn?
I think
that game.
Yeah, they could definitely cause us problems. I mean, going back to 3 years ago, they did really cause us problems. And you know, there was a while in that game where I thought we're not gonna win this. It took us quite a while to unless I'm getting my minutes wrong, I think it took us quite a while after they scored to really to get back into that game. And they do have quality, but yes, they have performed quite poorly over the last couple of years, as you mentioned before. Then I said I would have been happy to take a draw last night, because I thought it was going to be a difficult game, and you can't.
I just want to get in. It was only 10 minutes until
10 minutes
until it was Kjær own goal. 10 minutes after Damsgaard scored with that very good free kick.
Yeah, see, that was implying that maybe it's because of the quality of the goal that I sort of just remember.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the game was quite laboured from memory. I don't think it was a vintage England performance.
Yeah. So maybe that's what I was getting at. I don't know, but yeah, nonetheless, they gave us a tough game, and I think that could be, they definitely got the capability of doing that. However, I think we, should look at the. I'm no expert on Denmark, so I can't go on the ins and outs of why, but there's obviously a reason whether it be system or players not playing to the best of their ability, that they've not performed as well as they should have over the last sort of 3 or so years. So I think that obviously they're probably not very confident. In fact, if I was a Denmark fan now, I wouldn't be particularly confident going into the game, having just drawn to Slovenia. So I think there's definitely, if we play as, I don't want to say as well because it wasn't a great performance, but if we play like we did, sort of
certainly in the first half, maybe
in the first half against Denmark over the game, then I think we beat them. However, if we play like we did in the second half, I think they could get something out of the game. So I think it's sort of, yeah, it's definitely a game that we should be looking to win. Again, like I said, I'd take a draw because I believe, like, especially in the group stages, you know, there's not many teams that often go 9 out of 9 actually. But yeah,
yeah, I'm sure that those results against Scotland, or the game against Scotland and the United States in the last 2 tournaments, certainly etched on my memory, mainly because they were very
yeah. So I think that's why it was so important to get the win last night, actually, because I think there's always a game that you don't win. I feel like really in group stages, like even going back to when Spain won the World Cup in 2010, they famously lost their first game. So it's kind of, like that. So yes, it's certainly a game that I think we should win. I hope we win, but I also can see a not overly shocking scenario where we don't.
Yeah, and I think sort of going back to, I think why Denmark maybe have underperformed is that maybe their team kind of veers on the functional, maybe rather than the sort of free-flowing sort of midfielders like Højbjerg, who we know from Tottenham. Very capable, but maybe not the best going forward. And I think that's kind of maybe what we'll see from Denmark is solidity, but not a great deal of attacking flair outside of Christian Eriksen. Adam, your thoughts on the Denmark game? How do you think they line up? How do you think we'll do?
Now, by the sounds of it, at no point am I expecting this to be an exciting game. It's certainly not going to be as good as last time, where I'm more than happy to say England beating Denmark in the last year is one of the best nights of my life. But yeah, it's not going to happen this time around. I was, yeah. It won't be forgotten in a hurry. But
not at all jealous.
I suspect we're going to see something very similar. I suspect we're going to see England go into the game feeling as though that getting 1 goal and sitting on it will be absolutely fine, particularly because at this stage a draw almost certainly sees us through to the knockout phases. And yeah, I'm kind of scarred by exactly what you've mentioned, Stan. The games with Scotland, the USA, second group game, draw 0-0. It's a terrible game, but ultimately it served us well going on. So yeah, really wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm not expecting either side to run away with it because I'm possibly famous last word, because I don't think Denmark have the capability to do so, and I don't think England have the will to do so. So yeah, tight stuff expected. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. But I am glad that there's going to be another game on afterwards, just to hopefully provide a bit of excitement that no doubt we will miss out on when this one's going on. But yeah,
do we know what game is on afterwards? Also, do we know if this game is this game on ITV? Because I'll reckon
this is a BBC one. I'm sure this is a BBC one.
Oh, okay. Because I reckon on the BBC is much better in tournaments than on ITV.
Yeah, I might have got that wrong. So yeah, please don't clip this up. But yeah, the ITV cast I don't think is going to strike just yet. Yeah, but at the same time, yeah, it's both sides will be functional. I think we'll try to force the issue a little bit more, which is another reason why I'd keep Trent Alexander-Arnold in, certainly for this one. I mean, ultimately, Denmark haven't played a decent tournament game, certainly to my mind, since the last Euros. They went through a World Cup very poorly, and they ran France close, but that scoreline certainly flattered them. So, yeah, it's one that I'd be disappointed if we don't win, because we should, but at the same time, I'm not expecting it either, because I think it's going to be that sort of game, and a goalless draw honestly wouldn't surprise me. So yeah, I hope that's whetted the appetite, everyone.
Yeah, I know. I sort of hope that, unlike sort of the Stoke fans, that this isn't going to get clipped up and you're going to become a sort of viral sensation on Danish Twitter. I think us getting abuse in Danish maybe might be better, because I wouldn't be able to understand it, and I'm not sure Aaron would as well.
No, and nor me, for sure. So yeah, fire away, lads.
Let's go for, just very quickly, for the Denmark game, your team, if there'll be any changes, score prediction and scorers from each of you. I'll go last, and I'll base it on both of you. Finn, go on.
So I don't think I'd go with any changes, just because I think although we've talked about Foden, Trent, maybe these are players with tremendous quality, and I think maybe they just need time to bed themselves in a bit. So I'll give them the next game, and then sort of reassess if we can win this game. Reassess and then sort of look at the squad wider, maybe more widely against Slovenia. So no changes for me, I don't think, unless enforced. And then I'm going to go a 2-1 victory. And I think I will go with Saka for one and Kane for the other to get off the mark.
Nice and optimistic. Adam, go on. Score, team, scorers.
Yeah, I'm also not clamouring for any particular changes. The only one I'd perhaps consider is Luke Shaw fit. I'd like to at least see him get some minutes, but I doubt he'll start based on everything that's gone on. So, providing he's not fit to start, I'd stick with the same team. And yeah, I've already alluded to it. A goalless draw, I think, is possibly the most likely outcome. And, well, goal scorers, none. So, we'll see. I think we're at the stage now where anything else, I'm delighted to be proved wrong. But ultimately, as much as it would cause a fair bit of meltdown, I don't think it would be the worst thing in the world if we just get the draw out of it and move on.
Yeah, certainly. I think if we're on Friday night, then it won't be the best atmosphere in here or in the country if it's a goalless draw, as you predict. I am going to go for maybe slightly more optimistic in terms of entertainment value. And I'll say that it'll be 1-1. Let's go with Jude Bellingham for us. Jonas Vind, mentioned him earlier. I thought he had a very good game against Slovenia. He'll get second half equaliser for Denmark, and it'll be 1-1. Because I sort of agree with you. Very rare that we win all three games of our tournament, and I don't think that's going to change here. And probably on the basis of the Serbia game, that didn't really make me think it's going to change either.
See, for all the times I've mentioned Slovenia and them being possibly the poorest side in the group on paper, this podcast, I can see us actually getting the draw when we've rotated really heavily against them, and then that being a meltdown before the knockouts instead.
I certainly think Sesko, the tall striker with a very powerful shot, he seems like he could have a banger in his locker, and it feels right that it would be against us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll be back on Friday after the Denmark game, where we'll talk about what's happened. Hopefully a little bit more exciting than I think both me and Adam have predicted. Hopefully Finn's right. Hopefully Finn's wrong, and we've scored loads, and everybody's saying about how brilliant we are. The newspapers are filled with headlines about how it's coming home. David Baddiel and Frank Skinner are back in the recording studio, recording a new for 2024 version of Three Lions. amazing things could be happening by Friday, and we'll be back to review the Denmark game and talk about the Slovenia game, which will be obviously our last game in the group stages. Hopefully not our last game in the tournament. But I would like to say thank you to everybody who's been listening live. Thank you to everybody who listens on all the usual podcast platforms. Thank you to Finn.
Thank you.
Thank you to Adam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we will be back on Friday on all the usual platforms and 6:45, and we'll all see you then. Thank you.
Cheers.